Um, so first and foremost, just acknowledging Mana Whenua, where on the Rohi, where we're meeting now. That Kete mihi, kete mihi, kete mihi. Te Ateawa, Taranaki Whānui, Ngāti Toa. Acknowledgements too to everybody in this room who had a role to play. Could we have a show of hands of who in some way was connected to the assembly? Just there, although, yeah, like there are so many incredible people in this room who got to be part of this incredible experiment. And I also want to acknowledge all the people behind them and all the others that aren't in the room with us. And all the people that also let you be here today. Each and every one of you, they're with us too. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, kia taonei. So, my name's Emily Beausoleil. Why am I here? Yeah, why? For the last 5 years, I'm a politics instructor at Te Herenga Waka, and I was asked to I'm so lucky to be asked to be the independent observer for this project. I started 5 years ago, and the project was going before that. And it's been such an incredible journey to witness. And so just bearing witness to this has been a gift. Getting to be able to share this tonight is a gift. Those who are coming up to the stage now are those who are organizing, who are the dreamers, who are the ones that were the hands that made this come about. But there's also behind them, as you can feel in this room, so many others. But we're going to hear about this world of first, all as someone who studies deliberative democracy, someone who deeply cares about the Tiritio Waitangi and living this day to day more and more in where we live. This blows me away. So I'm so excited, without further ado, to be able to see this shared with you, all of the innovations, all of the learning from experimentation that's a part of this project. So may I ask everyone who's coming up to share with us today to come on down. And if you've got a mic with you. So you've got you've got the share screen is done. Oh, good. So you've got, it should be, yeah, good. All right. I think we're ready to go, and I'll put lights back up. Thanks, Sharon. Hold on. Anyone? So what we were thinking of doing to begin, how are you feeling? Good. A little nervous. Jitters a little bit? Yeah. What we might do to begin is it's so great that you're here and we get to share all these pieces and bring our own perspectives together around this. It's its own little microcosm of what it was, the assembly, and still is. If you would be willing to introduce yourself briefly and maybe your role in the assembly. And as we go, I have a specific question for you about a dimension of the project that you might already know in advance. Is that all right? So what we'll begin, maybe we'll just actually introduce ourselves first, and then we'll come back. Hey, Callie, and we'll start with the first question. Yeah, please take it away. I think they might already be.
What?
Karaoke and
Kia ora koutou, ko Kelly toku ingoa. He uri ahau o ngā whānui urupi. E tipu aki au ki Ōtipoti, he tangata tiriti ahau. I have been working on this project since the beginning with some of the lovely people here in Te Reo Ngā Tangata, the People Speak. Previously, I was working in participatory design for community spaces. So that was my direct sort of shift into participatory design for governance stuff. And then I was fortunate enough to get to facilitate the community-wide space alongside this wonderful wahine. You've got your own. All right.
Okay. Mā lo lovely soifua, mawale langi mama. I'm Makarita Makapelu, and I have been part of this journey right from when we started the Leaders Forum 5 years ago, and then later came on to the project team. Just to support how we were going to do it, and then co-facilitated the community space with Kelly. So it was an honour. It wasn't easy work, but it was just such a fantastic thing to do, in a community where I was brought up in. So kia ora.
Is this on? Yeah, it is working. All right. Tēnā koutou katoa, I ahu mai ahau I te pārekireke o Marotiri Maunga, ko Manga Huani te awa, ko te whānau rua taupare te hapu, ko Ngāti Pro te iwi, ko Ōreni Rocks Taratu ahau. I was actually a part of the rangatahi aspect of the assembly, so I'm one of the rangatahi leads of Future Unity, which was a group that started from a wānanga before the Climate Assembly. There is a big story when it comes to that, and I'd love to talk about it after this if you want to talk about it. Yeah, but that's a little bit about me.
Kia ora koutou. He uri au no ngā ruahine rawa ko ngā rauru mai tuku mama, he uri au no ngā haumoa mai tuku papa. And I joined the community assembly like a day before it closed out. So quite lucky I got into it actually. But through knowing Amanda, who's I believe right there, she told me be part of the Rangatahi Assembly, and so I did. That's how I also part of the community, one of the tuakana of it as well. Excited to be here.
With your mics right there at the ready, and so being trying to talk about it, let's hear about the rangatahi dimension of this. It's one of the biggest distinguishing parts of the story, eh? Yeah, tell us about that.
All right. I wasn't prepared for this, but okay. So in February, we brought together 9 schools in Porirua, and this was all supported by our Pakeke team, so I can't say that this was run by us. They actually organised this. Michelle, Amanda, Connor, Wairere, and probably so many more in the background, but they organised a rangatahi wānanga in February before the assembly for all the rangatahi in Porirua to come together to discuss what climate change is and just like authentically hearing what they believe in. We didn't teach them anything. They came with all of their knowledge and they kind of just displayed it through creative outlets. So we had workshops, we had what do we have? Poems, so spoken word, we had waiata, and we had art. And from that one day of wānanga, we came together and we created a waiata, we created a collective t-shirt design, and we came up with a whole bunch of speeches and poems for the Climate Assembly. Do you have anything to add? Yeah.
Following the assembly, we've been like a real power role, you know. It has not stopped for us. We've kept going since then. I don't think we'll ever stop actually. Hey, there's mana in kind of rangatahi action, and I feel like it's important that we kind of empower that and make it happen. And I think, to me at least, Fishinli, whatever it may look like for you guys, it truly means a lot to me and other rangatahi who are part of it. Anything else? Was that about? Yeah.
It's such a huge story in itself, what's happened. When I was thinking about how you came and shared with the broader assembly, because the vision that we'll hear about in a minute is kind of like a weaving of rivers, and there was like what you were able to generate together was woven in. Would you say about something about what it was like to kind of bring that to the assembly?
I thought it was a really cool chance to show the assembly, which I was a part of, the kind of other side to it, the rangatahi side to it, and come together in one room again, you know, actually showcase we are doing stuff with the rangatahi, we are, you know, being involved, we're staying involved. We showed them our waiata, our t-shirts, you know, our poems. It was really cool to actually come to like a kind of an equal ground across us, you know, because oftentimes it is not easy for rangatahi to come into like adult spaces, or it's adult, it's not equal at all. And so I feel by doing it the way we did, it made it a lot more equal and fair.
Yeah. We might come back. There's so much to play with there. Callie, would you tell us about the design of it is unlike anything in the world. So maybe about what the vanilla version is around the world, what a citizens assembly is, briefly. Yeah. But then talk about what it meant to be Te Tiriti led at the heart of this, how that showed up in the design. Yeah.
Kia ora. Citizens Assembly generally randomly selected people from the community based on a certain sort of this many people with this income, this many people, female, male, etc., come together around a question. Tends to be a really great experience for the people involved. That seems to be like an overwhelming sort of feedback, but they not necessarily effective in terms of creating change. And there's a lot of reasons around that, but probably a big one is where the funding is coming from. and the kind of there's like a conflict between how people can come up with solutions together and how government is able to enact decisions. So even like take the French Climate Assembly, for example, they were really, really positive about it, really groundbreaking stuff. And then if you look now, 10 years on, they implemented sort of 2 to 7% or something like that. It was like crazy. And originally they were really, do you know the stats? So that's
I don't know.
no. Yeah. So we wanted to acknowledge the good things about this form of deliberation, which has now been going for a couple of decades solidly in Europe, and other places, North America, Canada and stuff. But to look at what it would actually mean to bring it here in a contextual, in an environmentally appropriate way. I think for me, one of the big inspirations was the Mātiki Mai report into constitutional transformation. And it's not a prerequisite, but it's a huge amount of work that was done by Māori, commissioned by the Iwi Chairs Forum, to look at what it would look like for Aotearoa to be honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi in a decision-making space. So that was if you do know Mātiki Mai, the simple way to explain our thing is an experiment into one of those models. So we took a model where we had tino rangatiratanga and kawanatanga operating in separate spaces, but there was a lot of crossover as well. So yeah, I forgot you were going to bring. I didn't even look at the slides that you sent.
We couldn't load them, but that image of the rivers I'll bring up because
Okay,
it's on the website of yeah, there it goes.
There
you go.
Yeah, and as was appropriately started with the rangatahi, you know, we sort of think the technical term a tricameral model, so the two spheres separately and then coming together at the end. But that doesn't quite fit what we've done because the rangatahi aspect ended up being so significant. And there was work that happened in schools that Amanda and Michelle and Wairiri led for 6 months up to that wānanga that they had before the Climate Assembly. So we sort of is there a word, quadcameral? Does that, no?
A world of firsts. There's not even a
World of
word for it, Callie.
Yeah, so it's really, I guess, like Peter said in that video, it's about having the space to discuss things Māori without the influence of it's without the influence is going far too far because we had a lot of crossover. We shared a lot of things between our groups. And that would be different everywhere. And I guess that's the last thing I'll maybe land on is that for Te Tiriti to be get put into effect anywhere, it's going to depend on the local context, the local iwi, how the mana whenua, and all of that. So yeah, it's very, I think that's the other thing about what it means to create something that's Te Tiriti led is the local context.
That is staying with that question about being led by Ngāti Toa. What difference, or having Te Tiriti at the heart and having Ngāti Toa leading, where did that show up for each of you? Where did you feel it in the process, or what did you observe that was different, or like was clearly from being led by Ngāti Toa?
The invitation from them was very powerful to be part of it. And Helmut Mudlik is a very inspirational speaker, and he inspired us to be part of it. Like, we are part of it. We live here. They are kaitiaki of the land, but we are part of that too. So the invitation from iwi to be part of this big idea, this new thing, was very, very, what is it when you get pulled into something? You just need to be there. You just need to be part of it because like a movement, and, and their support all the way through this, their vision, kept us going. Yeah, because that is the greater picture. There'll be governments and councils come and go, but they will be there forever. And they opened the door for us to be part of that. So for me, that was so inspiring. I really, felt like I needed to be part of it.
Anything come to mind that you want to share on that note? How it felt different from other spaces sometimes?
Oh, well, it felt very homely, like very comfortable to be in. It wasn't at all, big blocky articles to read and analyze. Also, like, what do you know? What do you live through? What do you like relate to being in Porirua and experiencing the harbour change, experiencing all this, all that? It wasn't at all like governmental, well, partly, council funded or whatever, hey, but it wasn't like frightening to be in. It was, relational.
Yeah. Margareta, you were maybe, oh, you're gonna something on your mind?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think one of the things that really sticks out to me, there are so many things about being Ngāti Toa led that were incredible. And one of the things that I think was significant from a sort of more of the community perspective and also in our process of building the thing is how much vision and energy is able to just move forward through Ngāti Toa, and in the Mana Whenua Assembly, they didn't need to do so much whakawhanaungatanga as us. They were already on the same wave. They weren't looking to council to fix things. They were going to do, they're in the mindset, and I think that was really significant in terms of being an Indigenous-led thing, like the influence that had on all of us.
Speaking of, I was thinking about that, already the community, the connection is there, the collective sense of power is there, the working intergenerationally is there, tikanga was there, like knowing what deliberation even is, was there as wānanga.
Knowing the environment.
Yeah. And would you share, Margareta, about what you felt about the community side, where you were both holding the other stream, and what that was to kind of build that sense of community over that? What was that like in that room?
Heaps of ums. So the task was, bring these people together. And my experience of bringing people together as a facilitator is to start on the common ground. And everyone has to has a say about that common ground. And what the exercise I used is we created a treaty of how we were to be with each other. Some people call it an agreement, a treaty, rules, but rules is a bit much because we rebel against rules. So I just use an exercise for whakawhanaungatanga and got everybody to say what would stop them from participating. And when they fed back and told us what would stop them from participating, the second part of that exercise was, well, I'll fix it. Go and fix it. Fix that problem. And they came back and said, all kinds of wonderful things, all about relational, drivers. I will feel respected. That I would be I feel part of it, all of that. And as they said that, we wrote up our treaty from the words that they said. So that was the beginning of our relationship together. And everybody had a say. And it was the treaty was the thing that guided us throughout, really. All the technical stuff came in it, and Kelly's great at that. But the binding of everybody's, getting to know each other, respecting that there are different views, and there were a lot of different views, but no one really came to blows about it because we had our treaty to fall back on. Yeah, so that was really important to do that.
Thank you. My question for anything that comes to mind is like what happened? Like, so all these design features, all these innovations in the way that it was being run, community was involved at a whole other degree compared to other citizens assemblies around the world. It's unique because even the question was formed through a community participatory design process, right? Like nothing has happened like that before. The project team was composed of members of all across the community. And I don't know if someone would like to share also what the Porirua Community Leaders Forum, which is another piece of the puzzle that was innovated in the process as part of community empowerment. Would you like to speak to it? As a member of the Leaders Forum?
Yes. Here we have a member right here, another member. Also. The Leaders Forum was the initial move. There was no design whatsoever until Ngāti Toa and Te Ronga Tangata came together. And then we didn't start designing either. Helmut said, let's put a call out to our community leaders and see what they think. So the first wānanga that we did was back in October 2021, maybe 21. And out of that, people said really clearly, we think this sounds great. And we also think that there needs to be a similar thing at an inter-community leader level to be sharing information and finding solutions and just knowing what's going on, like that whakawhanaungatanga relational stuff. So it's really been kind of a consecutive development project, and they were a big part of signing off all of the co-design, both the plans and then reporting back to them. They've been meeting 3 or 4 times a year over the last few years. And yeah, it's definitely a space that is still growing. It hasn't quite found its form, I would suggest, but it's really a very significant part of this. I think in particular because one of the things that the vanilla version of the Citizens Assembly does is it gives you a loud consensus of public opinion, or as close to it as the Assembly manages to get. And then the Community Leaders Forum, it's more than double, like if they agree that this is good advice that's come out of the thing, you've got leaders all across the city who are now either able to directly use the recommendations from the Assembly or to collectively put pressure on the decision makers. So yeah, it's an amazing innovation that's still in development. And there's so many people in here. I feel like we should open it up to Simon.
Yeah. We might, because we're just staying with the design, all the innovations, and we're going to turn to questions of like, what did you observe or what did we learn in a minute? But why don't we turn to the audience and say maybe 2 or 3 questions from here, keeping focused on this question around like the innovations or the design that emerged, what they made. Are there any questions in the room that would like to come forward, be put to this wonderful group? Anything you'd like to hear more about, clarification on? Giving Finn some exercise.
Hold it nice and close to your mouth, Diana.
Kia ora. I was just interested a little bit more on the how you chose the participants for the Tangatiterity group. Yes.
So yeah, it's fairly straightforward. So we came up with Ngāti Toa, all of the, we came up with the demographic proportions that we thought felt the most like Porirua. So we tried to, and then we gave a little bit of extra weight, which is what sometimes happens depending on what the question is, to rangatahi. For example, we went 15 and up. Most citizens' assemblies will go 18 and up, but not younger. And then we had some help from the great people at Trust Democracy. It was Koitu, it was both, yeah. And we were able to use a free sortition program. So once we had it all set up, it was very surreal sitting in the room with Sharon and Simon and actually pressing the button go on this thing. And the first time we were like, oh, it doesn't quite have the right proportions. And then so it's a fairly technical thing, random stratified sortition. The hardest part of it was getting people to respond. And we actually did a old-fashioned hand delivery campaign of almost 12,000 invitations. And then once people responded to that, we could send them out a survey and say, please fill this out and we'll put you into the lottery.
We did the everything. We did everything. We did that because a random sortition didn't feel like very community-led or relational. So we could have just put all the names into the machine, but we just needed to add that little step because we found that because of our cultures, it didn't feel relational enough. So we did all the footwork for Sharon, to get the word out there to sign up.
What else? What else was done? There was lots of little things. Do you remember? Yeah. What do you
The sortition was definitely something that we were a lot more flexible on than any other assembly that I've read about. For example, we didn't meet on the first day. We didn't meet the quota for Pacifica that we had hoped. And so we went out into the community and found people who wanted to participate. Another one was that we invited rangatahi to stay sort of after day two. Day two was all around rangatahi, and that just felt like the right thing to do if they wanted to be there for the rest of it. So yeah, there was some fudging around the sortition, which doesn't normally happen. And not fudging, is that the wrong word?
No, I just want to say every adaptation in the name of relationality, A, yielded way better representation of exactly those who typically are underrepresented. B, could be justified. It was always still randomly chosen right to the very end. Even for those, it was asking people, hey, would you please put your name forward, so it was very rigorous. And C, I just learned at the Center for Deliberative Democracy last week, someone said, the biggest kept secret is nobody does sortition exactly right everywhere around the world. Yeah, I know, all of that effort, all of that, I know. So the biggest kept secret is it's actually a misnomer. Everyone adapts, especially in the global south, especially there, where this idea of the random, unrelational, fairness through not having relationships, So yeah, that I just wanted to make sure that was on the table.
It's something that we have noticed, an observation that there's a certain type of people who really feel confident about sortition, and it's the people who currently have a lot of privilege and power. So yeah, I'll just leave that there.
Any other questions about design at this time? Oh, Ben's ready.
Hi, kia ora, really cool initiative. So awesome work. My question was, how exactly were these final recommendations decided? Was there a vote? And how did you deal with, challenges or differences of opinion exactly?
So while we were doing our treaty, together, we also this is a little, thing that me and Kelly did after getting some advice. We also asked our group that we would love to get 100% agreement across the line. And we may not get 100%. So is 80% okay, in agreement? And they agreed. So we didn't have to fudge around by, the percentage that would agree in the end to something. We had already set it up that, anything to pass, we needed 80%. Going for 100, but 80% would do. So, and I'm going to hand it now over to Kelly, who did all the hard.
To know about that. There was lots of hard work from everyone, including the participants, hugely. It was hard work. There were a brief overview of the process. Is that useful?
Sure.
Of the days. So we started with whakawhanaungatanga between the two groups, and a bus tour of Porirua that Ngāti Toa hosted, which everybody loved by the sound of things. I wasn't on the bus, sadly. And then we went into some learning and starting to discuss, and the general process for getting to the recommendations was teasing out bits that were important to people, elaborating on it, and then simplifying it and getting it as close as possible. So the community group, I think, had about 11 recommendations that we went into the shared space to have with Ngāti Toa. And they had done their own set of about 6 or 7, which were, framed quite differently. And then we got to exchange those over in the break between the 2 weeks. And then on the final day, we all came together and we tried as hard as we could to get the language and to, there was some small groups of wordsmithing, big groups of like, what's the approach? And we didn't quite land it. So we agreed to do another half day, which is another innovation that we have used the whole time and is really, I think, something about being Indigenous led as well, is moving at the speed of trust and doing what needs to be done regardless of the initial timeframes that you had hoped to achieve that in. So yeah, hopefully that. And then we did at the end the thing where where everybody, when we finally got there, just in case there's any facilitators out there, because this is a really helpful technique, you say, everybody stand up. If you can't live with this, stay standing. And we used it a couple of times. There was a couple of times someone stood up and they talked about what it was. So in the end, I feel like we never really voted. We just agreed the whole way. Yeah. But voting is also a good option. We did vote during the process on different parts of it.
I have a question.
What?
I'm wanting to hear about how the rangatahi voice came through after their presentation on day 2 and how that came through the recommendation.
Okay. Well, after day 2, it was about 5 of us who stayed on the entire assembly, and through that we were able to give our whakaaro on everything going on. Throughout the entire assembly, we were told to group up randomly, so 1, 2, 3, 4 along the entire room. And through that, we'll be randomly assorted into different groups, and we could share our opinion, and they'll be heard. Depending on who you are, depending on how you feel. Hey, and through that, they could be shown and kind of collected through these recommendations up here. So especially for rangatahi, te taiao, and education, I feel that rangatahi voice was heard kind of the most, or the most prominently. But yeah, does that kind of answer your question? Just kind of actually being part of it, yeah.
It's really strong direction as well to take the rangatahi viewpoint into account when those areas were being performed as well.
Yes, yeah, there was. I remember. I'm going to share what I remember. Is I was really struck by that first day. I'm sure it was nerve-wracking to come into that space. You were already there, Santino, but that feeling of like 20 rangatahi were there in this massive space. But from the perspective of those ones in the assembly, before rangatahi came in, the question was, how will we listen to them? And it was all about priming that room to be like, your role is to listen, they're leading. And then when you shared, and then we broke into small groups, the question for those ones again was, what did you hear? And then turning to the rangatahi and say, is that right? And there was this real, is that what you're thinking of? This like real beautiful facilitation to encourage, like what Santino's saying about voices that often are the ones who are undervalued or crowded out, to be able to be leading on that second day. That was really watch. Yeah. I'm very conscious that we have participants in the room, and I wondered if you at this time might want to share no need to, but should you want to share what it was like to be in it, anything that might come to mind, and no need if not.
While you're thinking, I'll have it, which is the other thing about the Indigenous led thing was that they welcomed you into the space first day. So you actually had got to go into that space and be like welcomed by Ngāti Toa before coming into this big group of other.
Do you have anything you'd like to add? No need. Yeah, leave. Okay, yeah.
Hello everyone. My name is Ifupo. So I'm Samoan. I was part of the forum. But I think I was thinking in terms of the first introductory concepts that I heard is about a tiriti. It's about recognizing tiriti of Waitangi. And I think I was asking my question as, what does that look like? What does recognizing the tiriti look like in terms of the whole forum and the whole approach? In my perspective, it's about recognizing the fact that Maori people are tangata whenua. It's about recognizing that part. And therefore, I suppose the whole approach, in my experience, is that they provided the leadership. But we, as the diverse nature of Porirua community, we provided the content, the different ideas, the approaches. And I think that's, I believe that it's something that needs to be encouraged, recognizing that these are tangata whenua, and I am a manuhiri, but I'm part of. And I suppose that's the critical part of the leadership provided by Ngāti Toa, is the inclusivity. It's not based on power. It's not based on I am stronger than you. It's based on respect. And that's the key. Even with the concept of rangatahi, because somehow I feel that these kind of labels can actually be divisive. Because this, with due respect, these are our children. I see them as my children. And I have worked hard to pave the way for them to live a better life. And that doesn't mean that their voice is so important, because they will be the carriers of this land for the next generation and the next millennium. It's very critical that we hear your voices. At the same time, you're part of us. And that is, but my experience in the forum, it's very isolated. The rangatahi, when they speak about rangatahi, it's them and us, them and us. And I'm wondering, and I'm just putting forward to the leaders of this whole thing, how can you weave the fiber of rangatahi versus our generations? Because you're part of the journey. We were here, we will work hard, we are your parents, we work 3 jobs to put you through to school. Being articulate now does not mean that you have moved us away. So, but that's my input in terms of my experience.
How could I? Yeah, I feel like going through what we've gone through as, Christianity, we see a lot of, we're finished with the adult corridor. How about you two now? We can feel a bit, not exclusionary, but a bit othered to be like, okay, I've got rangatahi in the room, we've got to do this, got to do that, make sure it's this for them, make sure it's all that. And so I appreciate your corridor just about actually, hey, we are one kotahi, like it's unity. Hey, it's unity. Yeah, I would need like years to go through it all in my mind, but I love it all. I fully agree that, okay, yeah, well,
I just want to mihi to you. I really like the way that you spoke. That was really articulated really well, and I couldn't even say it like that, but I truly believe in everything you've said, Matua. Yeah, I don't have the words either. I'm like gobsmacked. I want to pass it to you, and then I'm going to talk later. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll just quickly say thank you, Matua, beautiful kōrero. The rangatahi aspect and taiohe and tamariki were also involved. Is both, one of the things that's really been leading, but it's also one of the things that I think has got the most room for development and improvement. And as you say, really to weave it in and not, it was kind of a separate strain. Going to 15 was already pushing the envelope, but not far enough. I completely agree with you. The difficulty, and our beautiful friends up the back would be able to talk to this, is getting into schools, getting access to children, it was so much work. It was like, they're not, oh my God. It's like Michelle's got her blood pressure thing on because of the, it was really hard. And until, so I think like if in Porirua, because it's a small place, there might be a way that we can continue to try and get, the schools to be part of bringing rangatahi into these spaces as equals, because we do. One of my friends just very briefly said to me the other day, like, the young people are older than us because they know what's coming, like they've got more knowledge about what the future is. And so in a way, we are young and don't have the knowledge, and they are the ones who are like holding it all. So I do agree with that. Should we leave? Oh, Rainey's got some stuff to say.
Yeah, I do, just a little bit. Intergenerational knowledge is so important. I'll just say that. It's the best way for young people to learn. I love learning from aunties, uncles, karawa, kuia, everyone. That's my favourite way of learning, and it's just through stories. I just love hearing the stories from back in the day. My whakapapa is actually to Samoa and to this whenua right here, Aotearoa. And so I love hearing about my experiences with my nan on my Samoan side and everything that she's experienced in Samoa. Those just add on to the layers that all of our young people have, and because we all come from diverse places and all of our homelands are actually affected by climate change no matter where we come from. Yeah, and I just really resonated with your kōrero, and that's going to stick with me for a really long time. Thank you, Matua.
May I ask you a question, all of you? Maybe a question around, we started to touch on, there's so much learning that came through experiment and doing things for the very first time. And the idea is also Ngāti Toa Rangatira doing this again. You know, this is one of the mechanisms that might come out in the city and the rohe when it seems right. What would you do differently? What would you want to play with next time? What would you want others to keep in mind when were they to do this again or elsewhere? Yeah, I feel sentiment ready. I see your face.
More time. Personally, I loved it from the moment I walked in to when I walked out late. I could be there for like all day, every day, meeting you all. Because again, we were like family by the end of it. And so I would give anything for more time with family. And so you'd actually just meet more, talk more, be able to make more recommendations, make it a bit more cute around the edges, whatever. Because like, again, it was fun. And I think it was really important kind of trying to keep the fun up while also while keeping it important to the kaupapa. And hey, sue me, but I think it's important that we recognize the time and energy that rangatahi will put into it. And maybe it's money for them and their time and energy. Hey, I know money's tight. Hey, we know money's tight. So recognizing their value, their worth through, putia.
Okay, sorry to break it to you all. I wasn't actually a part of the assembly itself. I was only a part before and after, but that was due to my own health experiences. But anyway, I supported the rangatahi before, and the rangatahi wānanga that we talked about earlier. And then after, through one of our Pākeke's PhDs that they're completing right now, I was a part of their PhD as a research assistant, and we went and interviewed the rangatahi after the assembly in focus groups. So they were like case studies. And so I got to authentically hear their experiences, and they were quite mixed. They were very mixed. Some loved it. Some loved being with adults. But others, they felt inspired. They felt, inspired. Yeah, I'm going to say it like that. They felt inspired by adults to say what adults wanted to hear. And that's what we picked up on throughout that kaupapa. But next time I love what happened. That was truly like amazing. It was beautiful. Like we've come up with so many beautiful outcomes like through Future Unity. But next time I would really love to see a rangatahi deliberate democracy space just for rangatahi, for us to come and collaborate, for us to kōrero and come up with authentic recommendations from our young people and just a broader kind of sense of young people, because I think we only focused on 9, but I know there's much more than 9 schools in Porirua. So if we were to connect with all of them, I could see a possibility of perhaps running an assembly during school times and connecting with all the schools instead of getting our aunties to run around, somehow just making it much easier and opening up to all the schools and holding it during school times. That would like take away a lot of barriers for young people. Sorry, I actually wrote notes to this one because I was actually really excited for this question. But yeah, preparation before, like the wānanga, support during from our Pākeke team, and just debriefing after the assembly. So through our Future Unity group, we're still connecting with the young people who contributed at the wānanga at the start of the year. So yeah, just doing that. And then a separate adult assembly. So I know that there was a mana whenua and a community. And then imagine if there was a rangatahi as well. And then we all came together and did that instead. that was just my idea. But
Anything come to mind?
I'm like Santino, time. Yeah. Time was really a restriction, I thought. Yeah, so more time on it. And I really want to acknowledge you, Ifepo, about what you said about the othering, because that was another really big learning for me when I reflected back was, did I make the space safe and welcoming enough for our young people? I didn't, that was a question that I had in my mind afterwards when I reflected on the facilitation. I hear just because our rangatahi, whilst with us in the group sessions, didn't speak so much. And then when they left the room, they spoke heaps. You couldn't stop them from talking. So, one of my learnings as a facilitator was, to take away and think about, ponder, was just how I make a space safe for everybody, including our young people. So thank you for that.
Kia ora. That was definitely something that happened to me in reflection of facilitation a lot. Honestly, I think we would try and improve on everything if we were to do it again. Yeah, but definitely I love this idea. I absolutely love this. I would have liked to have paid everyone more in general, and definitely paying young people as well. We were pretty limited because of it being not council, not government funded in any way. So the resourcing was pretty limited. And then another thing which you and I have talked about recently is most assemblies will provide a sort of resource booklet of information with their to people beforehand. And we didn't really spend a huge amount of time getting that as awesome as it could be. And we also didn't push it out through to the public in ways that there is that opportunity to really try and use it as an opportunity for public education. What other stuff did I just write down? There were things that came up like AI. We hadn't thought about AI. We didn't bring in any technologies into our deliberations. But we should talk, man. We should totally talk about maybe a rangatahi assembly could be Ngāti Toa's next.
who knows? Put my name forward.
I just do want to acknowledge too that this, as someone observing the commitment to being a learning culture, the commitment to flexibility, responding to emergent learning, and like you said, not being so tightly bound to an idea that it could change based on. There was so much improvisation that was rigorously chosen along the way in light of what was learned in real time. And I saw beautiful, deliberative, reflective worlds when you as a project team would meet time and again, are we doing this right? What could we do differently all the time? So I just want to acknowledge like what you're seeing now is also like the learning culture that distinguishes this project. That was part of its beautiful integrity too. A million things that could be done differently. Also, many to share. If other groups are coming to you saying, hey, we want to do something similar, what would you tell them for watchwords or guidance? What made the difference for you in terms of what worked well? What did you learn through experience that you would advise? Like, what would be your advice for others?
I get this question a lot. Shall I start? What are your local mana whenua, I think? Talk to the that's always my advice, and it always puts people right back, and they thought they had already got an idea or whatever. But it's the only advice that you could really give because it's local context. So unless you're doing it in Porirua, then I'm happy to share our learnings with you. But
I would advise the same as well. It's not just one person's advice. I mean, idea. And the way that an idea is brought around when there's conversation and there's food and there's time makes a real difference to it. So, and relationships, I just can't, all that soft data that's so important to us humans. that cannot be replaced. So building a safe relational space for people to feel free to speak and say their mind, speak their mind is really important. I think everything else, will come from that. Yeah, that's my.
Okay. I had it. Uh-oh. Here you go, you.
Okay. I think what I just said before. So a community group, a mana whenua group, and a rangatahi group, all having their own wānanga, but then coming together and coming up with recommendations as a collective. That's how you'll get authentic rangatahi voice. And if you really care about what young people are caring about at this time and about climate, well, that's what we focused on. That's how you're going to get an outcome, is from actually just having young people together in one room, because it is intimidating. Adults are intimidating, and especially if you're 15, because that's how young. Yeah, if you're 15, I remember when I was 15, I wouldn't want to talk in front of adults at all, and I still feel kind of weird talking to adults right now at 20. So yeah.
Yeah, I remembered. Thank you. Did I? What? Okay, no, keep it like not simple, but keep it understandable. Because I feel like for Rangatai especially, a big barrier is actually feeling you don't know anything. Whereas if you are human and you grow up, you know so much more than you could ever know. And so by making the kaupapa easy to approach, it makes it easier for Rangatai to come forward to the table and provide their whakaaro. Yeah, I feel like there's more in my head before, but hey, go hide it.
What is that 2 seats for Ratahi on council? Is it progressing? What is that?
I'll tell you a little something. Well, Future Unity, we had a hui with Porirua City Council with something, I don't know, a group anyway. And we did put that forward, and they are thinking about doing it, but they were waiting for the new council to come forward so that they could make that decision. So could be possibly happening.
Should we turn it to some more questions from folks? Yeah. Anything come to mind you want to ask these wonderful folks?
Yeah, it works. Hi, back to like kind of a design question. We're sitting in some kind of amphitheater, and I think it kind of influences the way we interact. I just wonder if the choice of a venue or the resourcing around access to a venue influenced or has influenced, or have you considered that early on in terms of how the architecture makes a difference? Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, Ashil, my dream, as soon as we started talking about this, I was like, we can make a space for this. Like, it really needs, I 100% agree, architecture could really influence the way these things could happen. We chose Pātaka because it's not a theatre, it's not an amphitheatre like this. There's different rooms and that kind of thing. Just while it's on the top of my mind, it's sort of like this, the marae, we didn't use Takapuahia that often, and that's because they're very, very busy, and also we are missing our incredible Jodie today from Ngāti Toa because she's at a tangi. So a marae would be beautiful. That would have been our probably number one, but it wasn't an option. Pātaka was a really good next option. But yeah, I have, with my background in architecture, I think there's huge potential for creating spaces where we can facilitate these conversations better. Yeah, 100%.
We've got a question that's related that anyone could speak to from someone on Zoom. How did you support the mental health and well-being of participants in conversations that may have raised some strong fears or emotions?
That comes back to the treaty that we created together. And that prepared, although we can ask participants, the reason why I am very strong about, that's our breaking ground and our, where we're all, sit on the same page. is that when something goes wrong, we fall back on it. And I always say if something goes wrong in the group or if something's not right, I'll go back. Are we all adhering to what we agreed to? And the group looks after themselves, and because they all agreed to it. But I think that that's a question that we could ask, the participants, because I'm like, I was hoping to take, endeavored to take care of your mental health. Did I? Did we?
Yes, definitely. The thing that was so important was that you did do the Te Reti right at the beginning and you did hark back to it. And there were disagreements and failures to see eye to eye, and there were people who dominated in some of the groups, which can be pretty annoying sometimes. But it gave us a way to deal with that, as you say. And the other thing that I was so impressed with was the reach that Ngāti Toa has within the community and how so much of that was apparent during the discussion, because I came along not realizing that it was an exercise in deliberative democracy and thought it was all about climate change. And that was really what got me there. And I think for a lot of people too, because interesting to hear Irene and Santino say what you're saying. I'm so impressed with what you're doing. It's for the children, it's for the tamariki and the rangatahi that we came along. It's your world, it's your future that we're talking about. And you're so important. And there should be exactly what you're talking about, where you have a voice and you feel confident with saying all the things you do. And Margarita's way of managing things will make sure that you are heard, your mental health is protected. And that was just amazing, blown away by the whole experience.
I think my experience is that if the setup right at the start is right, then because the well-being of everyone that was there, it's our responsibility as the totality of the group. It's not about just them. It's about all of us. But the fact that we have established the kaupapa correctly with the tangata whenua, with the facilitators, and as I said, it was very inclusive. Therefore, all of us should have felt that we are partly responsible in terms of looking after ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. And if Sharon wants to pipe in about the Manaki behind the scenes, potentially before we, just to speak to that question, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that. As everybody else said, kia ora, my name is Sharon. I was the person in the background. And as people said before, there were everything I would do differently. But one of the things that I was really proud of is how much we stayed in contact with the participants and that we spoke to the participants before the first assembly day and after every single one as well, just to touch base. And also provided opportunities to support them outside of that. Some of the stuff went online with Q&A, just so we could save some in-person time. And so providing support to people around that, opening up other facilities so they could access, touching base with people who had access needs around the presentation of information to make sure that they had everything that they needed, and to maintain the relationships so that the people who called them the first time were the people who called them the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth time as well, just to maintain those connections.
Even the team, Sharon, was as much as possible people who were from, they were also Porirua in a room, so someone that was contacting you had a connection, from where you were coming from.
Oh, got it again. I was just thinking about the mental health aspect, that there's sometimes conversations around the concept of climate change anxiety as a thing. So in terms of inherent within the topic, the concerns, the anxiety that climate change brings, I'm thinking that a forum like this is inherently constructive in addressing that, But I just also wondered if it came up as a topic in itself, what do we do about the well-being of people in the future in the light of climate change?
It's a whole assembly unto itself, that one. Yeah, the health is, yeah, definitely an aspect. It's I think one of the Ngāti Toa stuff is very empowering, like a lot of the experts were working on practical solutions. So there was definitely dark stuff.
Explain the role of, that was a question from Zoom, is the role of experts. So like, tell us a little about what does that mean to hear from experts in the process? What did that, well.
Okay, I'll talk to this briefly. When we developed the question, we went around as many community groups as we could connect with, particularly in relationship to the environment, but not specifically. There was a lot of like the commerce group and blah, 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 like everyone, scouts and yeah,
Lots of groups.
Lots. And through that, we were trying to find the common ground. What is it that everybody is concerned with? And we came up with the question that way, which we took back to the Leaders Forum. The question ended up being, how do we connect and respond as our climate changes? Yeah, living in Porirua's changing world together. How do we connect and respond as the climate changes? And as we did that exercise, we also teased out all of the kōrero that were most important to the community in Porirua, and built these themes around kai. Health was one of them. Health and well-being was one of them.
Responding to disasters?
Oh yeah, resilience response. And then we started connecting with experts based on all of that work, and starting as local as possible, and reaching out further. And everybody that we talked to was really, really happy to be involved. Basically, it was awesome.
But you were saying that hearing from those experts, what they brought into the room was gave reason for, you said something about they were leading in solutions.
I think we knew that, this is just coming back to me, we knew that we didn't have capacity to deal with the mental health crisis that is fully realizing the climate corruption situation. So we didn't go there. And we tried to stay with, what are people doing? I mean, that's the question, right? How do we respond and connect as a climate changes? It's an entry into having the discussion. And yeah, it's something that keeps me up at night, is when everybody, different too. We did want to have more things like, we had some quiet zones and things like that, just very practical stuff. But.
What about in the Wānanga? Is there anything that comes to mind in that question, that what was there to help address did anxiety come up, or what was there in terms of supporting you to be able to have some pretty difficult, dealing with difficult topics?
One of our, what would you call it, workshops in the Wānanga was, to me, it felt very linked to like, how do you feel about the climate? And that is inherently like kind of the future thinking. There's like anxieties, that's often fearfulness. And for our tairohi, it was often like, my homes are sinking and how can I adapt to that? What does that mean to me? And we explored it through art, through poetry. And I felt really powerful for them to, use their own voices, their own whakaaro to put it on paper and then read it aloud and be like, I can take ownership in what I'm doing now and what I see, and also what I can just talk about with my family, with my family. Anything else?
I think Santino said it perfectly, but I just wanted to mention that I experienced Cyclone Gabrielle, and that's what truly lit a fire in me to keep on doing this kaupapa. So if it wasn't for that happening to me, I actually don't think I would have been a part of this. It's when a disaster happens when you really want to find a solution. And since I had to relocate to Porirua from Tokomaru Bay, that's when I was like, whoa, it's happening here too. I don't want a big disaster to happen here. Imagine if there were so many people in this town experiencing it just like my hometown did, and we only had about 200 people, and it was chaos, true chaos. And Porirua has a much bigger population than 200. And so it shouldn't take a disaster for us to make change and find solutions now.
Kelly's right. We just didn't have enough time to really deep dive into the stress, the fear, the mental health issues that come with the subject. And so what we did was we really tried to focus on hope. You know, the hopeful, the action that brought hope, you know, and when you are action orientated, and it's such a huge issue, isn't it? It's huge, it's worldwide, it's everywhere. You've got to have your team with you and that grow. It's a movement. This is about a movement and that gives people hope. And I felt that the people in our just in the in our community forum, that in the beginning there was a little bit of confusion and a little bit of shyness, and at the end of it they felt so much more helpful because they were part of this journey. And so that is the way that we dealt with it. That's how we dealt with it.
Sounds brilliant.
Get on the waka.
Kia ora. So a couple of times it was mentioned the limitation of time, and I like that articulation of being a movement. And in my mind, I'm thinking about how wonderful the citizen assembly was. For example, somebody who experiences exercise for the first time and realizes how it connects the body and the mind and the spirit, and it's healthy. But if you only do it once in your life, you're really missing out. And so the question in my mind is a two-dimensional question. Number one, how can those who participated continue to exercise the community building that is possible through the citizen assembly? And how can the community exercise its own expansion of that, not just to the privileged few who started the first one, but continuing? How do you see literally building community with community assemblies? And what does that look like in terms of weights and measures?
You lost me on the last two words.
How can we build and use this? Well, in a community like Porirua, there's a lot of people working, you know, towards this. There are so many taiao groups out there, and what they are actually working against is, you know, the disasters that will happen. But it's like strength-based, right? When you think in a strength-based way, it means that you focus on what you want to build, not on, you know, so if you focus on the things that you want to build, it'll grow, you know. Just like the mental health question, we didn't have time to delve right into it, and we went the opposite way because we felt we'll grow this and that will deal with it. So is that one part of the question? Am I answering or am I raving?
Yeah, I think Amanda's going to add something. We get a mic up to her.
Good, Amanda.
Yeah, and can I just say as well that I think being Ngāti Toa led is really significant here, because something that I didn't anticipate to the extent that it happened was that Ngāti Toa have taken these recommendations and they have put them into all of their departments and they are promoting it amongst the community. They're starting a website where we'll be able to, where the community, the wider community, can track projects that have come out of it, or contribute their own projects if they think that they're aligned with the recommendations. So from Ngāti Toa's go and do it, and because they trusted the process, they 100% took the recommendations and are going for it. So we're looking at how we will track and weigh and measure this at the moment.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Amanda Dobson aho. I am lucky enough to be the EnviroSchools community facilitator in Porirua, and which gave me the opportunity to be involved with this incredible kaupapa. World leading. Yeah, it's been an incredible learning journey, and we're still on it. And yeah, learning so much along the way because we're cutting new ground, right? And we're learning as we go. And so I guess Michelle and I are just going to share a little bit of like so we all have a role and a responsibility in this, whether we were part of the, this is my opinion, whether we were part of the assembly or whether we live and or work in Porirua. So our job, we've been involved in the Community Leaders Forum over the past 5 years that was moving towards this. And for a long time, I was wondering, like, what is my role in this? Like, you know, yeah, how do we bring, and it was about bringing, being the people in the community that could bring young people's voices. And so, you know, and here we have these incredible young people leading, and so much is going on for them as representatives, as young people. And our job is to be their support crew, to be there as they need them, to make it easy, to so we're continuing to do that. And we each, like, there's something for all of us that's about what resonates for us. And so we have the connections. At the moment, we are working towards a community of practice for our schools, a community of practice on climate action. And we are in the schools inviting them on that journey. They've been invited along the journey, and it is very challenging times to be asking these, bringing this to people who don't have a lot of time and energy around all the other things. But it's so critical. And I guess the context of our schools at the moment that are saying, that are committing to upholding te tiriti beyond what the government is saying at this point in time, we're saying the recommendations in Porirua from this process are our way to uphold te tiriti or waitangi in Porirua, because it's iwi mandated, because it's community led, and we need to be making this a critical part of the learning for everyone in our space. So let Michelle add her voice to that.
Just getting back to the point about bringing people together. So Porirua actually has about 3 areas that in the 20 years that I've worked there, people pretty much stayed in their 3 years. I think this assembly is the first time there was representation from across the whole of Porirua in one room. And now we've hopefully got 22 of our 30 schools committed to being a community of practice across Porirua, and doing it without any promise of time or whatever. I mean, it's early days, but it's to me, it's bringing those schools together to share practice in a way that, you know, there was hope for that in the Kahuiako system, but that's gone now. But we're doing it, and we'll do it without. Well, actually, I think Helmut sums it up brilliantly. And when he talks about this and the outcomes of this, he says, "No one's coming, whānau. We have to do it. No one's coming." And I think that's what one of the outcomes for this in terms of bringing people together. And schools have to do this because they have to teach how to think and act critically in a whole range of things, and that's been smashed a bit at the moment. So it's like, this is the opportunity for schools in Porirua to really get it together, I hope.
The question up here that's been reading.
Tēnā koutou, kei te mihi nui ki a koutou, mō koutou whakaro, kei te mihi nui ki a tātou hoki. Ko Kate Metcalf Porirua, tangata TDTO. So I've really enjoyed listening to this. I've got a few process questions because I think the process is amazing, and if we can learn from this and embody this in the ways that we make decisions and the groups that we connect with, there's lots of different scales at which we can include some of this thinking. So some of my questions, one of the things, some of the nuts and bolts I don't really have my head around, like how was it funded? So you said not council, not government. How was it funded? How many participants were there? And I heard about the 12,000 flyers, and the little bit of fudging around the sort of fire or whatever it was called, in order to get a truly reflective group that accounts for some of the power dynamics. But yeah, how many participants? How was it funded? Yes, those are my first two questions. And then my last one, you talked about 80% being sufficient to carry a motion. And this idea of saying, everyone stand up. And if you can't live with this, stay standing. Now, if there were people in the room, and I don't know if there were, I'm interested, who couldn't live with it, did that still mean that you could pass the motion if you had 80%?
No,
Okay, cool. I wasn't clear on that.
that would mean adjusting the,
Awesome.
yeah.
That's great. So the can't live with it means a decision has to be different.
yeah. I mean, it would have created a whole different corridor that needed to happen.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then I guess so on the back of that is just the 20% that didn't necessarily agree. What was the relationship with them in terms of the decision? What was the
Yeah. So in this case, we didn't need to use the 80%. We had full consensus. Yeah.
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 We just used it as a safety,
Yeah.
you know, so we could, like, at the beginning, so we could, you know, fall back on it.
It's not a given, right? That
Yeah.
you're going to have a full consensus.
Yeah.
But it also, I think that your question is appropriate, though. The things that come to mind for me is who's going to want to be still standing up and say that they don't like it, and when everybody else likes it, you know, that kind of thing. Hopefully, is just the nature of the relationship building that allows people, when they get to that final day, to feel comfortable enough to express that stuff. Yeah, and then number of participants. We aimed for 50 in the community-wide space. The Mana Whenua group, they had a different system that they were using, and they had between 20 and 30 people maybe coming into their space, up to 40, I'd say, on the last day. The rangatahi's
That being 40 and 40.
40 and 40.
Yeah, but different people in the Mana Whenua group.
Yeah.
But the same numbers overall.
Oh, yeah, cool. And then must have been at least, it was about 40 at the Wānanga, eh? 40, yeah. And then maybe a few less that came on the second day, and 25 on the second day. Funding. Yes, she's our funding manager.
Person. So everything but $10,000 was non-government, and the $10,000 came in the last 2 weeks, and that funded the videographer. And that was from Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. So that's GW adjacent. It was about 225,000 all up. The largest chunk of money was from J.R. Mackenzie, and we were awarded 85K from them, 20K from Wellington Community Fund in October 2021, and we rolled that funding over 3 times before we could actually push the button and go, because we were operating at the speed of trust. There was funding from an invite-only lotteries fund, from COGS, from NECAL, from George McCarthy, it's a smaller one, and funding from Vic for evaluation and research. And part of that funding from Vic also doubled the daily stipend to $100 a day per person. And that was $26,000 of that funding was just daily stipend. But yes, no government funding and philanthropic. And there was a 3-year gap between the first funding and the next funding we got. It was a long 3 years.
And an extraordinary amount of volunteer work and paid roles from Ngāti Toa that weren't included in the funding that we collectively created, and also some paid time from Wesley. A lot of paid time from Wesley. A lot of resource from Wesley, Enviro schools, to Papataiao. Like, there's so many organisations that put resource into this through people power, and the council, the Porirua City Council as well, have walked alongside us the whole time. They printed everything, and it's even a bit of in kind from the City Council.
question about the treaty that you started, particularly around when there was a breach of that, who decided that it was a breach? How was that adjudicated on, and how was that resolved from your perspective, facilitated?
Kia ora. We had a pre-plan, but we didn't need to enact it. And that actually came way, way, way back when we were talking about what does a tiriti-based structure look like. We identified extremism as a potential risk factor for deliberation. And at that point, we came up with basically a 3 strikes rule. So with the treaty, as Makarita said, like Makarita was really good at just pulling us all back to it and saying, remember our treaty? Are we all adhering to this? Is this kōrero? You know, respecting that. And as Ifupo said, you know, people are holding themselves in that space a lot of the time.
So we didn't really have to bring it up as a remember our treaty or anything. Most of us, we all got on really well. And there was space for debating. You were allowed to debate in safe, respectful ways, because that is what we agreed to. And we also agreed that we will value, you know, that people have opinions, you know, and there were strong opinions, but they weren't strong over anyone. Yeah.
One of the things that was on the treaty that one of the participants added was focus on the problem, not the person. And I think that was a really useful one that is enabled, you know, that. So yeah, the treaty was really powerful, and it helped everyone to know how to be in that space.
We're at our time. I want to maybe our last question, is that all right? And then we'll close for the evening.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko kāta au, e noha ana au I Highway Houghton Valley in Ainei. I just want to say awesome. And the main thing what I want to say is please invite me so I can learn more from you. I'm working with the Highway Houghton Valley community. I've been doing that for the last 15 years. And we don't have things in place like you do, so we could learn a lot from it. You are invited to come to our community as well, and we'd be keen to show you around. We have just recently been given $50,000 from the Regional Council to start a project around climate change and also building community. So there's lots of crossovers. One of the things that struck me with what you said before around hope and anxiety is things that we are also facing and struggling with. We have implemented an idea to address that, which has got kind of mixed results. So just kind of putting it out there as kind of strategy. We've developed a 100-year vision for our community, and it's based on the Māori worldview that the present is viewed through the eyes of 7 generations in the future. Many people have connected with it. We're very fortunate that our school, I should also say that you've got 9 schools in your community, we've got 1. We're very much smaller. Our school principal is mana whenua, and we have mana whenua involvement in our project, who really have embraced this 100-year vision totally. But a lot of people struggle to kind of understand it and make sense of it. So I'm just putting it out there as kind of an idea, and what do you think of it, and what do you think that would work in your context? Do you think there's problems with it or whatever?
I think any context, you can apply this thinking to any context. Yeah, I do quite a lot of deliberative work, facilitation with the activist community, and that's always small communities. Yeah, let's talk for sure.
Any final words that are burning that you'd love to
Can I just put in a thought? Just it's like cautioning the leadership or you people who are leading this whole about the use of the concept tiriti in the internal agreements of groups, because I don't want to diminish
Yeah.
They manage the tiriti is a sacred concept. And historically, we all here is still happening. So just questioning whether appropriate to continue using the word tiriti in those small group agreement. But I have to go because I need to take my metformin.
Thank you.
So, and I want to give you the last word if you wish. I just want to really thank you for being here, for all the work you've done, that you're still doing, that you're still making and leading and actioning and dreaming, and it's still ongoing. And I just want to acknowledge all the work that you've done, that you've brought into the room with us. Also, everyone here who's been a part of it, those who aren't here who have been a part of this, all the rest of Future Unity and the incredible work that you're doing. If we can close with Te Rauparaha's Lament, which we often began the days with, thanks to in the assembly, just in the words of Te Rauparaha, and also which really brings the spirit of deliberation and democracy and community empowerment and sensitivity into the room. Let's close this way together, maybe. Ka oho te wairua, te matara, te tinana, te aroha, ki te aroha, ka ka te rama. Thank you. So I thought that was a nicer way to close. Yeah. Okay.
You're very good on your feet.
Do you see me sharing documents to be able to? That was
very good.
We didn't know if I'd be able to do it. I had that for the Canberra one. I got the whole room to do Te Rauparaha's Lament in Canberra.